بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا. أعزائي أبنائي إخواني الطلبة، يتجدد بكم اللقاء من جديد في سلسلة محاضرات Ophthalmology Made Easy. محاضرة اليوم تتصف بطابع خاص وطابع مميز حيث أنها تجمع بين الماضي والحاضر. Before I was planning to do a review for keratoplasty in the recent management of keratoconus, but then I decided to make a review for keratoplasty from the 18th century up till now, from juvenation to maturations. And the reason for that the evolution in the keratoplasty and the different milestones in the development of keratoplasty is a testament to human ingenuity and shows a relentless pursuit to better vision. So I am targeting the postgraduate student and all doctors who are practicing the field of ophthalmology in different hospitals to revise this lecture and stands on the different milestones in the development of keratoplasty, so that they can understand and estimate how much the old people they suffer, so that make us to stand on the ground of their success and make a successful story in the evolution of keratoplasty. So I ask you to listen to this lecture, and I hope that you will enjoy this lecture, and let's dive deeply and see what's inside. Now, the aim of this lecture and the intended learning outcome is to elaborate and study the evolution of keratoplasty from the 18th century up till now, and give the important milestones in each part of time during this journey, and elaborate the efforts made by old ophthalmologists so that we stand on the ground of the recent modern keratoplasty surgery based on their efforts. So we will elaborate in each sector of time the major milestones and the pioneer personnel during that time, from the 18th century up to the 21st century. The 18th century characterized by just inspirations, and the concept of keratoplasty is created during that time. Then in the 19th century, experiments start and to do this type of operation mainly in animals. And then initial success happens in the 20th century, and further refinement started. And at the end, we reached to the selective layer transplantation and the bioengineered corneas and so on. So we will elaborate each part of this time in details and discuss the important milestones in each era. Now, when we want to speak about the evolution of keratoplasty, it is broadly divided into era of heteroplasty, that's at the 18th century, from the 1800 to 1900. And this era characterized by trials and major frustrations. That's trial of animal tissues to be implanted to another animal tissue, or animal tissues implanted to the human tissue. And the other era will be the era of homoplasty, which is after the 18,000th century. And we will spoke about the pioneered doctors and personnel during each era. So let's start with the first. One of the famous doctors in the 18th century who conceptualized the principle of keratoplasty is Erasmus Darwin between 1731 to 1802. He is the grandfather of Charles Darwin, and he takes the credits of the first mentioned the concept of keratoplasty as part of the procedures to manage keratoconus. He said that after a corneal ulcer, perhaps we can change the scarred cornea, so that he is the first one who fired the chart that we can change the opaque cornea by another structure. So he's the one of the famous pioneers during the 18th century. That's Erasmus Darwin. Now the other one is Colin Quincy between 1750 and 1805. He's a French doctor. Actually, he's a cataract surgeon. Published the first monograph regarding the possibility of changing the cornea then one of the ophthalmic journals. This is at 1789, and it contains the earliest description of method of treating the scarred cornea by a simple way of keratoprosthesis. That's the cornea can be cut and replaced by glass. This glass is placed in a silver ring and stitched to the sclera and cotton thread. Of course, all these cases end up by failure and endophthalmitis, and patients didn't gain any vision. However, this is the initial attempts, and this represents the first initial keratoprosthesis during the 18th surgery. Now, the other famous doctor is Karl Helmy between 1814 and the 19th century. Also, he attempted many experiments and that we can change the cornea with a transparent structure. He did the first heteroplastic keratoplasty by transferring a cornea from a fish and is implanted to the human being. He's Karl Hemley between 1772 and 1837. Another one well-known famous doctor who is a physiologist from Germany is Franz Rosinger between 1768 and 1855. He's the student of Hemley that I have spoken about him before. He inspired by Hemley, and he did the first xenograph from the dog's cornea, and he gives the name of keratoplasty to this type of operations. So his name is coined with the name of keratoplasty. As I will show later that before it was named as ceratoplasty, as I will show you one of the monographs. Another pioneer in this regard also is another famous doctor, which is Samuel Bigger. Now, this Samuel Bigger was captured in the Sina by some Badu people, and he was captured, and he's asked to do an operation for one blinded gazelle on his cornea, and so he's the first one who did allogenic keratoplasty in animals between transferring cornea from one gazelle to another gazelle, and this has been between 18,002 and 18,046. So the name of Samuel Bigger is coined with the gazelle transplantation. Now, the other important or pioneer in this regard in the United States is Richard Kasim, who was inspired by Samuel Bigger. He did the same experimental trials of xenoplasty in the United States. And as I show here you, he was using this name, Keratoplasty, as you can see here. And he published this in one of the journals in the United States. So you can see here, this is the publication in the American journal, and this is the ceratoplasty. This happens between 18,008 and 18,061, nearly at 18,044. Okay, so you can see this is the picture showing the assistant is preparing the animal for the keratoplasty, and this is the doctor is waiting inside to take his cornea to be implanted for another person. So this is one of the pictures that shows these type of operations. Still, we are speaking about the pioneered personnel that they have a landmark in the evolution of keratoplasty in the 19th century is the Arthur van Hippel. Arthur van Hippel is a German ophthalmologist who is pioneered the first use of trephine. This is the trephine that has used by him and is invented. This is an motorized electrical trephine that he used for full thickness penetrating keratoplasty, of course, from animals to human. He uses the rabbit's cornea. And after that, he performed the first lamellar keratoplasty. It was performed by him with the use of the same trephine at 1888. And he was believing that full thickness graft is not successful because that we cut the endothelium and the dismal membrane of the host cornea. So he believed, along with other doctors, that if we preserve the endothelium and we implant just the superficial layer of the cornea, so we will succeed in doing the transplantation. Of course, all the operations end up by failure. And the reason that he was taking a full thickness graft from the donor, that's from the animal, either as a rabbit or a dog, and he implanted the full thickness corneal graft onto a lamellar host bed so that he preserved the host on endothelium and Descemet's membrane. And after many trials, all the operations end up with failure after some time. And it has been reported that he is the first one who performed DALK procedure in dogs, that he did lamellar dissection in dogs, and it has been linked to his name. After those procedures, Van Hippel becomes very famous, and this is his clinic, and a lot of people who are suffering from corneal pathology was seeking him for consultations. So this is Arthur van Hippel. This is one of the cornerstones in the development of keratoplasty in the 19th century. After Arthur came the British ophthalmologist, who is Henry Power. This Henry Power, he refined the work of the Van Hippel, and he introduces the concept of aseptic techniques, and that's why Arthur succeeded in doing the lamellar keratoplasty after he utilizes the aseptic techniques of Henry Power. And Henry Power is the first one who claimed that it is a matter of fantasy to continue implanting cornea from animals, and he suggests for an allograft transplantation rather than a xenograft transplantation. He did a lot of experiments on animals, and all of them end up with failure. So he's the first one who claimed that xenograft has no role in human being, and we have to revert to allograft, that's donation from human tissue. So this is another one of the pioneers in this regard, Dr. Henry Power. Before finishing speaking about the major milestones during the 18th and the 19th surgery, I would like to mention the major challenges that faces doctors during the 19th century that lead to the major failure of the all the keratoplasties that happens at that time. One of the main reasons is the lack for the knowledge regarding the immunology and the ignorance for the role of the immunology in the success of the graft, and as most of the operations end up by failure due to the immunological rejection. Also, some of the rejections happens because of the infections and the lack of aseptic techniques. Also, one of the major contributing factors. Also, the lack of the anesthesia at that time. Most of the operations was done either with the use of iodoform or cocaine, topical anesthesia, or they give alcohol to the patient so that he gets drowsy and they do the operations. This is also one of the contributing factor for the failure during that time. Also, the donor tissue storage was not established at that time, and most of the grafts was from animal source, because the idea of cadaveric donation is not widely accepted at that time, and there was no any preservative techniques at that time. Another thing that there was a major concept of shift toward the lamellar keratoplasty because they are less complication as compared to the penetrating grafts. And this is the principle that is highlighted by Hippel, Arthur Hippel. And most of the doctor, they go toward lamellar keratoplasty rather than penetrating keratoplasty. So you can see that initially the major evolution in the keratoplasty start as a lamellar keratoplasty, and you will see later that now at the 21st century also we are going toward lamellar keratoplasty again. So at the end, despite the painful failure that laying the foundation for what was become one of the successful story of the 20th century. So the major failure that happens during that century make the ground for the success story in the 20th century. Now let's speak about the evolution in the 20th century. And the ground of the modern keratoplasty evolution, as you can see now, is based on the initial evolution that's made at the beginning of this 20th century, which is characterized by the era of homoplasty and the start of the human-to-human allogenic graft transplantation, as invented by Edward Zerb, the first operation, which is done in 1905. We will speak about this in details. However, during this century, I will categorize the evolution in different countries based on the locations in Spain, in Czechoslovakia, and in Germany, so that we should understand that at that time the evolution was mainly prevalent in Europe. However, still in the United States and other parts of the world, they are not well developed. Now, when we speak about the era of 20th century, still doctor at that time still influenced and affected by the result that facing the doctors during the 19th century. And most of the doctors, they believe that lamellar keratoplasty is better than penetrating keratoplasty for many reasons. One of them is that the simplicity of the technique as compared to the penetrating keratoplasty, because of the lack of the technical procedures, the lack of the sutures, the lack of the microscopes, the lack of the antiseptic techniques, and the primitive informations about the immunology. All these factors and variables led the doctors to concentrate on lamellar keratoplasty rather than penetrating keratoplasty. Another ethical aspect that the doctors at that time, they were condemn penetrating keratoplasty as from ethical point, and they condemn also the donation from a human being to for keratoplasty. They still insist on xenoplasty. That's why at that time there was very prevalence of the xenoplasties, even from the failure. And this is example of one of the articles that published at 1921 that in the American Journal of Ophthalmology that condemn the penetrating keratoplasty and the donation of human beings. Also, the unavailability of grafts from human beings, and as you can see here, they were putting the whole eye in the aseptic solutions. So all these factors make the lamellar keratoplasty very prevalent as compared to the penetrating keratoplasty. And the first successful human attempt of allogenic graft to human beings is made by Dr. Edward Zerm. He's from Austria, and he did the operation at Olmütz near the Prague at Czechoslovakia, which is known as the Czech Republic now. He did this operation at 1905, and even he did this operation, and it was very successful at that time. But still, some doctors they argue against the penetrating graft and still continue to doing allogenic graft. Now, the paradigm shift in the concept has been changed by Edward Zerm, who did the operation for a 45 years old farmer, Aliaus Glor, who has sustained chemical injury by line to his corneas for many months before the operations. And fortunately, during the operation, there was a child who sustained severe penetrating injury for his eyes. So he removed the cornea from that 16 years old or 11 years old boy, and he implanted to this farmer. And one of the eyes get rejected immediately, and the other eye sustained good vision for a long period of time. And was a paradigm shift in the concept of penetrating keratoplasty by Edward Zerm. So the first operations is done at 1905, and this make the doctor to start think about the penetrating keratoplasty as alternative to lamellar keratoplasty. Dr. Edward Zerm, he uses this trephine, which is used by Van Hippel, Arthas Van Hippel, and this is a circular electrical motorized. When you press on this area, it will rotate, and it will lead to cutting of the cornea, as you can see here. This is the same trephine that he's using to trephine the cornea. And this is the picture during the operation while he's doing the operation. This was a major success in the first human allogenic graft. And Edward Zerm, he died at 1944. And even though operation was at 1905, but he didn't publish much papers, although he has transplanted more than 45 cases, and he was very famous at that time, and this is his hospital and his clinic, but he didn't publish much papers. Maybe he was affected by the war at that the Second World War at that time, and there is no much published papers from him as far as penetrating keratoplasty. And as I said, that even though some doctors still they argue against and condemn the use of human tissue to another human, and still continue to doing lamellar keratoplasty from animal source. So this is the father of the modern penetrating keratoplasty is Dr. Zerm from Austria. Another pioneer in the field of the modern penetrating keratoplasty is done by Anton Elching. He's also from Czechoslovakia, and he did around 174 penetrating grafts. And at that time, the popular trephine of Van Hippel was the one which is used during operation. They were using a 4 to 5 millimeter corneal grafts. Another famous one is Roman Castor Viego. He's from Spain, but he later on traveled to the United States and became one of the famous doctors in the United States that he is transferring this technology from Europe to the United States is related to this Roman Castor Viego, and he's the one who invented the square shape keratoplasty, as you can see here. At that time, most of them, they were using the Van Hippel trephine, which is a circular trephine. Now this Roman Castor Viego, he used the square shaped keratoplasty. And as I said, he's a Spanish in nationality. Then he traveled to the United States, and he's the one who places the ground for the modern keratoplasty in the United States. And he was very famous and practicing keratoplasty in the United States. Now, the other big move came from Russia by a big ophthalmologist who is the Vladimir Filatov between 1875 and 1956, who has performed plenty of keratoplasties, and he's the one who invented the first tissue bank in Odessa, and he performed more than 842 operations, and he received the donation from cadaveric. He's the first one who invented the principle of preserving the human cornea from a cadaveric source, and he was using a special preservatives to keep the cornea at that time. And he performed a lot of number of operations, and he gave a lot of information and the experience of penetrating keratoplasty, and he is the one who said that penetrating keratoplasty is much more superior than lamellar keratoplasty, and he describes a lot of the complications and the technical problems that faces the doctors during the operations. Also, he has innovations in the instrumentations. He is Vladimir Filatov, and as I said, this is one of his operations that you can see that he established this knife. So he's introducing the cornea through the knife through the cornea, and then he cut the cornea. At that time, the square edge graft was popular. So as you can see, he's not using the trephine, but he's using a square edge trephine or a square edge knife, and he cut the cornea in a square shape. And as you can see here, he establishes the first tissue bank, and he preserved the cornea from cadaveric source and use it for another patients. This is Vladimir Filatov. This is provide a huge advancement in the modern keratoplasty by his experience and the huge number of operations that he has performed. Now the next move is from Spain, from Dr. Jose Barraquer. At the mid of the 20th century, or at the from mid to late 20th century, he invented the first tissue bank in Spain, and he's one of the pioneer in the field of keratoplasty. As I said, that the concept of lamellar keratoplasty was very popular at that time, and one of the reasons is the lack for the technical instruments for doing penetrating keratoplasty, and most of them they were using the manual trephination of the cornea, either using the Arthur's manual or manually, as you can see in this operations. And Barraquer is one of the first people who invented the first tissue bank in Europe, in Spain at 1960. And this is the bulletin for the information for the people who want to donate their cornea after death. And this is the first publication for this to encourage people for donation. It says in Spanish, dos ojos para más de una viga, banco de ojos para tratamientos de la ceguera. وهو يعني عينان لأكثر من حياة، بنك العيون لعلاج العمى. ف Barraquer is regarded one of the pioneers in keratoplasty in Europe in general, and in Spain specifically. And you can see here he's also invented the suturing using the silk sutures for the cornea. This is another example of the penetrating keratoplasty done during that time by Dr. Barraquer. As you can see that the sutures pre-placed on the sclera, so that they will do it like this. This is named as superimposed compression suture to keep the graft in place because of the lack of the tensile suture at that time and the techniques for suturing, which is available now. You can see the manual trephinations, or by the use of the Arthur's trephine. And this area also, during this era, shows the evolution of the circular graft. As I said, that the late 19th century and early 20th century, they were doing the square shape penetrating graft. After that, the circular graft becomes the standard of care for the next 100 years. So this is an example of the penetrating graft. As you can see here, he's cutting the cornea, and now the eyes open. So now he will put the graft and then use the compression suture like this to keep it in place. So this is the era of the circular grafts. Now, let's speak about the evolution of keratoplasty in the United States. While Europe was in the golden time for the attempts for keratoplasty, the United States was still in its infancy in this race, because even the evolution that made by Edward Zerb at 1906, the doctors in the United States get inspired, and the first attempt was made at 1930. So you can see how much the gap between that time and this time of keratoplasty. And also the further improvement in the evolution of keratoplasty in the United States, done after the establishment of the first tissue bank in the United States, which is regarded as a significant milestone in the development of the keratoplasty in the United States. And this tissue bank made by Dr. Patton, which is named as Pittsburgh Eye Bank initially, and then at 1961 establishment of the Eye Bank Association of America. And this encouraged people for donation and improvement in the tissue media and also the preservation techniques, so that this make a very strong push for the doctors to go through keratoplasty. This is the picture of the tissue bank, as you can see at that time, at 1960. And this is regarded one of the most important evolution in the world, because they also start distributing the cornea outside the United States. Now, one of the most famous doctors, as I said before, which is Roman Castor Viego, he's a Spanish doctor, and he started learning the keratoplasty at Spain in combination with Dr. Barraquer. And then he traveled to the United States, and he became one of the most famous doctors for doing keratoplasty there. He validated the techniques for preservations, and he plays a major role in the establishment of the tissue bank there. And as I said, that he is the father for square edge or square shape keratoplasty, as you can see here. And he establishes this knife. I will show in one of the videos how to use this knife. He has double razor, so he can cut the cornea in a square shape, like the block of the watermelon. So one of the most important pioneer person in the United States is the Roman Castor Viego. In this slide, this is a demonstration for the razor double blade invented by Roman Castor Viego to fashion the square-shaped graft, as you can see here. It is a double blade, very sharp edges. He drew the square shape over the surface of the cornea. Then he excised this quadrant from the cornea like a watermelon pulp, and then he places the new graft. Then you see this is the compression suture, superimposed compression suture to secure the graft on the surface of the cornea. And this is the shape after healing. You can see the square shape graft. And then he applied the sutures. Now, this way was very popular at that time, and Roman Castor Viego is one of the popular people in this regard. After that, discovered the 10-0 sutures and start doing the interrupted 10-0 sutures. This is another way, which is invented by Vladimir Filatov, that use a long knife like this, so that passes through and through, and then you can fashion the square-shaped graft. This way of grafting was very popular at that time. After that, the circular graft becomes popular. And apart from his technical skills, Roman Castelviego also shares the Dr. Richard Patton at 1944 to establish the first tissue bank in the United States. After that, Roman Castelviego becomes very famous, and he was very genius doctor at that time, and many of the medias are looking to interview and make.
Y yo creo que eso lo recuerda todo el país.
Like this,
Han sido muchos años de españolear a la manera mejor. ¿No le parece, doctor?
Bueno, yo hacía lo que podía.
Bueno, vamos a hablar, si a usted le parece, y el ojo naturalmente plantea una patología muy varia.
Que está muy expuesto a los traumas externos y por lo tanto hay patología traumática, además de patología orgánica que se manifiesta en los ojos.
Here also I will demonstrate the electrokeratome or electroplastatome that's used by or invented by Roman Castelviego. And in this video, it is used by Dr. Barraquer to fashion the keratoplasty. As you can see, this is the component of this keratome. It's very simple and it is electrical. The strange thing that he's using the shaving blades as a cutting edge for the cornea. You can see he's removing, and you will see that he's using the shaving blades to cut the cornea. See, this is the shaving blades. So this is invented by Roman Castelviego, and now what we are seeing now is Dr. Barraquer explaining about this microkeratome. And as I said, also in the mid and late of the 20th century, one of the evolutions was the establishment of the discovery of the 10-0 sutures. And this is done by Richard Trotman, and this make a huge revolution in the keratoplasty by the establishment of the 10-0 suture by Ethicon company. So you can see here how he's using partial trephination of the cornea. Then he's using the keratome to have a lamellar graft. As you can see how it is very smoothly, exactly the same idea of the recent and modern microkeratomes that is present in the nowadays from different companies. So by revising the history, you can understand how the modern technology reaches to us now, because there is a lot of people who have failed many times in the past centuries, but apart or even from their failure, but they make the ground for the successful story that we are facing now in the field of keratoplasty. You can see now the cornea, he's fashioning the cornea as a lamellar graft. Here again, I must mention this person, that is Richard Patton, who establishes the first tissue bank in the United States at 1944. And he inspired from the tissue bank made by Mr. Vladimir Filatov at Russia. And he was keeping the eyes in a jar like this in a warm water, and later on they place it in hemolyzed blood kept at 5 centigrades. And the initial donation was from people who underwent execution in the prison at Sing Sing prison. So inoculation done in very short time and kept in these jars, and can be used for up to 8 days after the inoculation before get used as a lamellar graft. So the first tissue bank in the United States at 1944 was invented by this doctor, that's Richard Patton. Now, if we want to speak about the major development in the field of keratoplasty in the 20th century, this century witnessed a major advancement in the field of keratoplasty, and keratoplasty transformed from just being an experimental procedure to become a routine life-changing surgery. So the main advancement is the standardization of the keratoplasty procedure. The other thing that by the end of this century, the success rate reached up to 90% in the uncomplicated cases. Of course, the beginning of this century witnessed the major event, which is the first allogenic graft transplantation in human being done by Dr. Edward Zier at 1905. We'll speak about the details of this surgery. And this opened the door for the different doctors to open the race and compete in this regard. And the major advancement happens after this event at the beginning of this century. Another advancement happens in the field of lamellar keratoplasty with the innovation of certain instruments and equipments that we will speak about them. And also this century witnessed the establishment of the tissue bank, the first international tissue bank in the United States, invented by Dr. Townley, founded Patton Townley Patton at 1944, and this also helps a lot of doctors to find the appropriate and adequate donor cornea for their keratoplasty. And also the advancement and innovation in the micro surgical techniques and the advancement in the equipment and the emergence of the microscope. All this also lead to advancement in the keratoplasty field. Also as I said, the operating microscope and also the sutures, the 10-0 sutures, also improves the surgical techniques. Also the advancement in the immunosuppression and the rejection management and the development of the corticosteroids and the understanding of the mechanism of rejections. All this lead to the increased awareness of the doctors of the reactions that they will see in the patients after the implantation. And this also contribute to the advancement in the field of keratoplasty. Another aspect in the major development in the milestones in the keratoplasty in the 20th century is the improvement in the corneal preservation technique, which happens between 1960 and 1970. From the start and the primitive way of preserving the tissues in a hemolyzed blood media or in hot normal saline, the improvement in the cryopreservations and the use or the emergence of the McCarry-Kaufman tissue media and also the Optizol tissue media. This will extend the time for the utilization of the graft and also facilitate the transportation and distribution worldwide of the graft. Also, this is add to the major advancement and the development at the 20th century. Another aspect of the development in the field of keratoplasty in the 20th century is the advancement in the diagnostic techniques like the slit lamp biomicroscopy and the pachymetry and the ability to visualize and count the endothelial cells and monitor the reactions of the host to the implanted cornea. All this add more insight and more information to the doctors regarding the reactions that happens and the response of the recipient tissue for the cornea. Also, the occurrence of the artificial corneas in the form of keratoprosthesis or the Boston keratoprosthesis in selected cases where the implantation of allogenic graft is contraindicated. Also, this century or the 20th century also witnessed the conceptualization of the principle of endothelial keratoplasty. Although the major advancement in this regard start in the 21st century, however, the initial investigation and research has been made at the end of the 20th century, and also a long-term studies can be conducted by doctors at the 20th century and recognize and determine the different complications of keratoplasties and also conceptualize the principle of lamellar keratoplasty. Especially the different layers of the cornea can be implanted, preserving the rest of the cornea. So all these advancement has been happened and witnessed at the 20th century, and this adds to the legacy of the advancement in the keratoplasty. And lastly, but not the least, among the major evolution in the field of keratoplasty in the 20th century is the development of laser technology in the field of keratoplasty. The major milestones in this century is the development of excimer laser at 1970s and the introduction of the BRK at 1980, and also the LASIK procedure as advancement over the BRK at the 1990s, and also get FDA approved and globally adopted by many doctors. Also the introduction of LASIK procedure or the LASIK in the keratoplasty has been also applied in the late of this the 20th century, although it mainly use it as smoothening the irregularities of the donor and recipient corneas. However, a major use of the excimer laser, and namely the femtosecond, starts in the beginning of the 21st century. So these are the major development in the 20th century as far as the field of keratoplasty, and laser technology add a very large spectrum in the evolution on this regard. Now we will speak about the evolution of the keratoplasty in the 21st century. This century characterized by the cornerstone for the most modern keratoplasty procedure that happens today. And it is not just the homoplasty, but it is a selective homoplasty in the form of selective transplanting the layers of the cornea, like the endothelial layer or the stromal layer or the Bowman's layer and so on. And also characterized by the innovations of the laser or LASIK assisted keratoplasty or femtosecond assisted keratoplasty, and also by the implantation of the tissues, what's known as cell-based transplantations, and also the revert back to the xenoplasty as an alternative to the global shortage of implants like the xenia implants. And we will discuss in the details about the ethical issues behind the xenoplasty. So this century characterized by a major evolution in the field of keratoplasty. Now we come to the evolution of keratoplasty in the first 21st century, which has witnessed a marked significant advancement in the surgical techniques and the technology in the materials, and leading to the advanced improvement in the patient care. And in the 21st century also transformed the keratoplasty from what's known as one-size-fits-all procedure to a precision-based layer-specific surgery, so that we can selectively change any layer of the cornea based on the underlying disease. So the one-size-fits-all principle has been changed to the procedure that is precision-based layer-specific surgery, with improvement in the safety and the efficacy of the this innovations. So also the 21st century witnessed a advancement in the bioengineering technology and the robotic technology and the regenerative medicine that promise for the improvement and revolutionize the corneal transplantation, making the vision restoration is accessible goal for all people who are suffering from corneal blindness. So the 21 century shows market shift from the full thickness corneal transplantation to a selective layer transplantation, namely the lamellar keratoplasty. And this technique targets only the diseased layer of the cornea and preserving the rest of the cornea. The most famous one is the deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty, which is known as the DALK procedure, that replaces the only the anterior portion of the cornea, keeping the desmus membrane and the rest layers of the cornea, and implanting the donor cornea devoid of any descent or endothelial layer. This is known as deep anterior lamellar keratoplasty. Also, the other approach, which is the posterior approach, lamellar keratoplasty, which is known as the Desmet's stripping automated endothelial keratoplasty, abbreviated as DSAC procedure, which aim to replace the dysfunctioning epithelial layer in cases of Fox endothelial dystrophies or pseudophakic corneal dystrophies or any diseases of the endothelium. So this is one of the major advancement in this century that replaces the full thickness graft to a lamellar graft. The other advancement in the lamellar surgery, which known as the DMAC, an ultra-thin donor graft only around 10 to 15 micron thickness without corneal stroma. This will offer faster visual recovery and lower rejection rate than the DSAC. In the DSAC, there will be a very small layer of stroma. However, in the DMAC, there will be no stroma. The other evolution and advancement in the 21st century is the precision or the use of the femtosecond laser, known as the femtosecond assisted keratoplasty, which allows the surgeon to create precise and customized corneal buttons and grafts with different shapes like the zigzag edge or the mushroom edge. This improves significantly the wound healing and improves the graft stability, and also improves the visual outcomes as compared to the manual keratoplasty. Also in this 21st century, there is a huge advancement in the bioengineering technology and bioengineering of the cornea, and a lot of synthetic alternatives so that the cornea can be synthesized biologically by bioengineering technology, by the development of acellular corneal matrix. Part of the cornea is decellularized by certain gamma irradiation or whatever, so that there will be no risk of rejection, and it will be reshaped and customized according to the need of the patient. Another thing in the advancement in the bioengineering is the what's known as the artificial cornea, and the famous one, which is the keratoprosthesis, the Boston keratoprosthesis or the alpha core. And recently in Russia, they invented the MICOF keratoprosthesis or the core net keratoprosthesis, which they claim that it integrates better with the host tissue as compared to the Boston prosthesis. Another advancement in this century is the development of the three-dimensional printing of the or bioprinting of the cornea, and it's still experimental trials to try to have biological tissues that offers printing for the patient's cornea in a three-dimensional layers, so that it is more biocompatible to the host cornea. All these are advancement in the 21st century. Still in the context of the advancement in the 21st century, there is a concurrent parallel advancement in the eye banking and donor tissue preparation in the form of the pre-cut tissue and the hypothermic storage versus organ transplantations, and also the advancement in the gene therapy and the ultraviolet cross-linking of the cornea before being implanted. Also, the advancement in the minimally invasive surgical technique and the use of robotic surgery, what's known as the sutureless transplant, the DMAC and the DSAC with air bubble in the anterior chamber. Also, the robotic assisted surgery like the Da Vinci surgery robot, which has been invented to tested for ultra precise graft placement. Now, there are certainly challenging aspects in the future regarding the donor storage. There is a global demand of more than 12 million people are awaiting the corneal transplantation. And this raises the issue of xenotransplantation again. As you know, we have spoken that the beginning of the idea of corneal transplantation start as a xenotransplantation. Now the same idea is coming back because of the huge demand and the shortage in the corneal transplantation. And this aspect of xenotransplantation has a religious aspect for us as a Muslims, because now the most famous is the use of the pig's cornea for the xenotransplantations, and using part of this cornea, which is known as the xenia. We will speak about the religious aspect for us as Muslims regarding the xenia or the xenotransplantation. Also, among the advancement in the 21st century is the advancement in the medicine and personalized the treatment for patients, and the development of the pluripotent stem cells therapy, and also the improvement in the immunosuppressive therapy, and also the gene therapy that can yearly predict those people who are at risk for rejection, and also those people who are at risk for inherited corneal dystrophies. All these are recent advances and challenging in the 21st century, so that doctors are looking for solving these problems. To summarize the major advancement in the keratoplasty field in the 21st century, here is some of the milestones that happens during the 21st century, starting from the FDA approval of the keratoprosthesis, which happens at 2006, and then the widespread adoption by doctors for the DMAC, DSAC, and the selective transplanting the endothelial cells sutureless through intracameral approach. Also, the research work and the advancement and the preclinical trials in what's known as the three-dimensional printed human corneas. This field is still under experimental level and still under the preclinical trials, which means that there's a creation of a synthetic or bioengineered cornea using the three-dimensional printing technology. This three-dimensional printing process allows the creation of the cornea, which is tailored for a specific size and shape according to the need of the patient, using the biocompatible material with very low risk of rejection, and what's known as the biocompatible ink, which is made up of the patient's stem cell, so there is no risk of rejections, and can be customized according to the need. And this biocompatible material will grow and substitute and fills the gap in the global demand in the donor tissues of the natural cornea. So this is still experimental technology, but it is one of the major milestones in this century. Also, what's known as the CRISPR edited cornea testing, which is also still under experimental levels and the preclinical levels at the animal level. This technology means that the CRISPR is an abbreviation for the clustered regulatory and interspaced short palindromic repeated CRISPR sequence. So that it means that they utilize certain protein known as the CRISPR9, and this protein is able, in combination with the messenger RNA, to edit the host mutated DNA sequence. So the aim of this therapy is to target the mutated gene therapy, so that they will prevent the occurrence of certain hereditary diseases of the cornea. And also this technology is applied for some hereditary diseases of the retina as well. So the aim of this therapy is there is special proteins by special messenger RNA, which is sometimes coded from some viruses. And when they apply to the host cells, so you can edit the genome for that host cells and cut the affected mutated genes, so that there will be no more hereditary diseases in that species. So this is also experimental level under the trial, but this is also one of the major milestones in this century. And as I said, the emergence of the bioengineered corneas also in the last trials, in the preclinical trials, which is the phase 3, which is also will revolutionize the keratoplasty and solve the problem of the global demand of the natural tissue. So this is the summary of all the advancement in the 21st century. Now, as far as the contribution of the Arabic nation in the evolution and literature of the keratoplasty, I have searched the web and looked for many sources, and they all divided into the pre-20th century era, in which there was a limited awareness of the practice, and the practice of ophthalmology is not well developed because of the lack of the infrastructure. And from the mid of the 19th century, the Arabic nation get influenced with the advancement in the field of keratoplasty in the Western countries, especially those doctors who are studying at that part of the world. And when they come back to their countries, they start implementing and realize the importance of keratoplasty and try to transfer this information towards their country. The other area is the beginning of the keratoplasty in the mid of the 20th century, around the year 1950. And the first keratoplasties happens at that time, mainly in Egypt, and after that in the Jordan. And lately at the 1980 was in Saudi Arabia. And this late onset of the field of keratoplasty in the Arabic nations is partly related to the ethical issue of accepting donation of cornea from dead cadaver to the human being. And this faces a lot of discussion among religious people and medical staffs, so that they get convinced about the principles and the role of the Islamic Sunnah in this regard. That's why it's lately appearing as compared to the Western countries, and it started mainly from doctors who are coming from the Western part of the world, and they come to their countries. They start importing corneas from outside their country and doing keratoplasty in their countries. The first eye bank established was in Egypt at around 1950 to 60, and also after that followed by IPANC in the Saudi Arabia between 1980 and 90s, and also in Jordan at that area. And also the Arabic nation contribute to the advancement in the field of keratoplasty by establishing advanced centers that's dealing with diagnosis and management of patients with corneal pathology. And at that time, it was initially based on importing corneas from outside. Then they established their own tissue banks. Of course, the rest of the Arab countries still they are depending on importing corneas from outside, and there are some local small tissue banks available. We will speak roughly about some of these countries. In the era of the late 20th century, chose the witness of a establishment of the different tissue banks, as I said, namely at Egypt at the 1980s, and also at Saudi Arabia at the mid to late 1980s, and also after the endorsement of permission for donation. And as you know, the religious barrier plays an important role in delaying the acceptance of keratoplasty because of the cultural factors and the misconception regarding the disfigurement, so that this also retard the spread of the keratoplasty during that time. But after the religious endorsement made by the Saudi Arabia and the religious people, this opened the door for the establishment of the different tissue banks, namely in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and also in Arab Emirates. Of course, Lebanon also among the Arab countries that establishes the tissue bank at a very early time. At the 21st century shows expansion and advancement in the infrastructure of the tissue banks. And for example, the Jordan tissue bank becomes one of the pivotal tissue bank that's not only supplying the domestic needs for the country, but also supplies adjacent and neighbor countries. Also in the beginning of 2000, the year 2000, the establishment of the tissue bank at Tunisia. So this is the major tissue banks in the Arab countries. As I said, that the religious barriers and the misconception of disfigurement and the cultural barriers, all these plays a role in rendering the rapid establishment of the keratoplasty as well as the tissue banks at that time. But after the endorsement of the Saudi Arabia, the global acceptance of the people for donations start, and this plays an important role in the advancement in the keratoplasty in these areas. Now, I will speak briefly about one of the newly emerging technology, which is the use of the intrastromal decellularized porcine corneal lenticular implantation inside the lamellar pocket in the cornea, especially in patients with keratoconus, as an additive tissue procedure to strengthen the cornea. Now, this is a newly emerging technology which is still under clinical trials and application, and long-term follow-up still is not available as far as the immunological response of the host tissue, and also as far as the acceptance of the patients for this type of technology. Now, I will discuss this point from mainly from the ethical point of view and the Islamic rules regarding this application for us as Muslims. So the next discussion will be as far as the ethical rules or the ethical consequences of the use of this technology for us as Islamic nations. Now I would like to speak about one of the important issues that's recently emerging, which is the use of the animal tissues inside the human body or inside the cornea. Now, as I have discussed before, when we discussed about the evolution of the keratoplasty, that the initial experimental trials started as xenoplasty or xenograft, that's utilizing donation from animals to the human beings. And at that time, there was a major failure in these operations because of the primitive immunological and the primitive knowledge available at that time for dealing with such big operations at that time, which is the transfer of animal tissues to human tissues. However, now recently, and in the view of the paradigm shift in the technology and advancement in the field of immunology and in the field of genetics, and the better understanding for the various chemical reactions and immunological reactions that happens inside the body, and also in a view of the global demand of the donor tissues, so that's the cornea, and the large gap between the people who are waiting for surgery and the people who need corneas, which there is a global shortage of the supply of the cornea. So doctors start thinking how to use the animal tissues again, so they revert back to the same principle that is emerging at the 18th century, which is the xenoplasty. Now it is coming back again, but with certain technological processing and modifications, and for better tackling the operations to avoid the risk of rejections. Now, I will discuss about this issue in view from 2 points, from as a doctors or from medical point of view, and as well as Muslims from ethical point of view. Now, as a medical doctors or as from medical point of view, as you know, the main challenging points for the xenograft is the immunological reactions. Now, the recipient's immunological response is unexpected for such type of operations, and most of the cases initially which done during the early 18th centuries end up by failure because of the primitive knowledge in the immunological human response. However, now, because of the availability of the genetics, understanding of the genetics and the immunosuppressive drugs and the advancement in the immunology, so this process can be handled in such a way that they can minimize the reaction or the rejection response of the human being. Now, another issue is the zoonotic diseases. There is a risk for transmission of diseases from animal source to human beings by this technology, and this should be also taken in considerations. Now, the other major concern for doctors is the ethical concern, especially for us as a Muslims or for Muslim nations, that as you know, the animals, there are different animals. There are animals that we are allowed to eat them, and there's animals that we are prohibited from eating them, like the pigs. And our Islamic rules and Islamic jurisprudence prohibit us from using these animals, namely the pigs, because they are impure and we cannot utilize them. Now, as you know, that Islam places a strong emphasis on the preserving of human life and alleviating the suffers from people, but this should be dealt with within the rules of the Islamic Sunnah, so that we cannot override the principles of our Islamic Sunnah. Now I will try and speak in Arabic to explain to some extent what are the general available rules from different Islamic schools regarding this issue. أن أصل الحرمة في لحم الخنزير هو كما ورد في القرآن الكريم: حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل به لغير الله فمن اضطر غير باغ ولا عاد فلا إثم عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. وأن هذه أصل الحرمة لا تقتصر فقط على أكل لحم الخنزير، وإنما على استخدام حتى الأنسجة بتاعت الخنزير، لأن النجاسة موجودة فيه، وبالتالي حتى استخداماتها الطبية يعتبر محرم، وهذا ما نص عليه في بعض المجامع الفقهية. ولكن مع تطور الزمن ومع الاحتياج لاستخدام بعض الأنسجة من بعض الحيوانات المحرمة مثل الخنزير خصوصا، أصبحت هناك يوجد بعض إعادة النظر وبعض التعديل في هذا العلم وهذا الفقه تحت مسمى الضروريات تبيح المحظورات، necessity overrides prohibition. الضروريات تبيح المحظورات، وبالتالي تم تقنين استخدام هذه الأنسجة من الحيوانات المحرمة زي الخنزير في أضيق نطاق، وهو تحت بند الضرورة، وهذا الدور الذي يختص به الطبيب، وهو الذي يحدد في أنه هناك خطورة محدقة بالمريض في عدم استخدام هذه الأنسجة، وفي عدم وجود أنسجة حلال ممكن استخدامها للحفاظ على النظر لهذا المريض. وبالتالي نحن كأطباء معنيين بهذا الشأن، ليس من الناحية الطبية فقط، ولكن حتى من الناحية الفقهية والدينية، لأن أنت كطبيب أنت من ستبلغ المفتي أو الشيخ بأن هناك خطر طبي في ما لو لم يتم زراعة القرنية لهذا المريض من أصل حيواني. وبالتالي دراسة هذا الموضوع مهم، ونحن معنيين به كأطباء لأن يمس ديننا الحنيف، وبالتالي المسؤولية تقع عليك كطبيب في أنك لو أخطأت التشخيص أو أخطأت النصح في هذا المجال. وبالتالي هناك سأذكر في الشريحة القادمة بعض الآراء لبعض المجامع الفقهية بهذا الخصوص، لأن هذه التقنية بدأت ترجع من جديد، وعلى الطبيب أن يعي ويعرف ما نوع الأنسجة التي يقوم بزراعتها داخل القرنية، لأن ذلك يقع تحت طائلة المسؤولية الدينية فيما لو لم يبلغ المريض بذلك، أو أنه يكون قد ساهم في إحداث هذا الإثم بالنسبة للمريض، وبالتالي يقع تحت المسؤولية الدينية. هنا سأذكر مثال لبعض الفتاوى المعاصرة فيما يخص استخدام الأنسجة الحيوانية، وخصوصا أنسجة حيوان الخنزير في داخل عين الإنسان، من مجمع الفقه الإسلامي الدولي، والذي كما أسلفت أنه يجيز استخدام هذه الأنسجة في أضيق نطاق تحت بند الضروريات، وأن الضروريات تبيح المحظورات كما أسلفنا، necessity overrides prohibition. ولكن شددوا في أن هذا الإذن مؤقت، ويجب أن يزول هذا الأمر في مجرد توفر أنسجة حلال، سواء من حيوانات حلال أو من وجود أنسجة بشرية. وهنا إنجاز لي أن أرجع بكم بالذاكرة إلى أنه عندما بدأت عمليات زراعة القرنية في الفترات السابقة، كان هناك جدل بين العلماء وبين الأطباء في جواز استخدام القرنيات البشرية من إنسان إلى إنسان آخر، وكان بعض المدارس الفقهية تحرم استخدام هذه الأنسجة للإنسان من باب أن ذلك تغيير في خلقة الله سبحانه وتعالى. ولكن مع تقدم الوقت وفهم المدارس الفقهية لأهمية هذا الأمر ومواكبته للتطور العلمي الذي يعود بالنفع والخير على الإنسان في حفظ النظر وحفظ هذه الحواس المهمة التي حبانا الله بها. فأصبح هناك فتاوى متعددة في جواز استخدام القرنيات البشرية من الشخص الميت إلى الشخص الحي، وبذلك أصبحت هناك مواكبة لعلم الفقه والسنة لما هو متطور في العلم. نجد الآن نفس الشيء. أول ما تظهر التقنية الجديدة وهي استخدام أنسجة الخنزير في داخل عين الإنسان بما يعرف xenoplasty أو xenia. I will explain about this also. يأتي الرأي الأول وهو بحرمان أو حرمة استخدام هذه التقنية، ولكن مع الوقت نجد أن هناك استفادة للمريض من استخدام هذه الأنسجة، وتأتي الفتوى الشرعية مواكبة لهذا. ولكن القاعدة العامة وهي أن الضروريات تبيح المحظورات، وأن ذلك يتم في أضيق نطاق في باب عدم وجود توفر أنسجة حلال، وأن هناك خطر محدق بالمريض فيما لو لم تتم الزراعة. ومن هنا يأتي دور الطبيب في تحديد هذه الأولوية، وبالتالي يجوز استخدام هذه الأنسجة بهذه الشروط. So to summarize the different milestones in the evolution of keratoplasty, as I said that initial trials and experiments started in the 18th century mainly as a xenoplasty, and at the end of the 18th century also some of the artificial prosthesis was invented. And then in the 19th century the process of lamellar keratoplasty in the form of xenograft also started. And by the end of the 19th century, initial attempts of penetrating keratoplasty allografts started, and the major success happens at the year 1905 by Edward Zerb. And then by the end of the 19th century, the process of lamellar graft in the form of DALK or deep posterior lamellar keratoplasties, and then becomes predominant in the 20th century. By the end of the 20th century, a monolayer lamellar graft in the form of DSAC and DMAC started and get further refined in the beginning of the 21st century with the emerging of LASIK procedures. Now the era of intrastromal xenografts in the form of xenia implants, and also the bioengineered corneas and cellular implantation of the endothelium becomes in this century. So this slide summarized the different milestones in the evolution of keratoplasty over around 2 decades, 2 centuries. And this shows the effort made by old people to make us stand on the ground in what we have achieved at this time. بهذا القدر أعزائي الطلبة نصل إلى نهاية هذه المحاضرة، والتي هدفت من خلالها إلقاء بعض الضوء على تجارب وخبرة الأولين في مجال الكيراتوبلاستي و the evolution in the field of keratoplasty from juvenation to maturation. And I hope that you have benefited from this lecture. And I finish my talk by the statement that to write the future, you need to just read the history. I hope that you have enjoyed and benefited this lecture, and I am looking forward to meet you soon in another session. At that time, I hope for you the peace and the best of luck, and thank you very much for your audience, and see you soon.